Years ago, when I was maybe 12 years old, I built a model of the Starship Enterprise bridge. And honestly, I don't think I even finished it. It was a complete disaster. Starting with the tester's paint that I globbed on with a thick brush. So there were drips and runs and clots. And I think I probably ended up throwing it away after trying to paint the red railings. So with my somewhat improved skills, I decided recently to try this project again. The beginning of this video gives you an idea of what it looked like. I want to go into a little more detail now and how it was all made and put together and some tips and tricks I learned along the way. And that's what made it challenging and kept me up all night. I'm really happy with how it came out. I have to say right up front that it's not 100% screen accurate. It's more my imagination of what this bridge should look like or what I wanted it to look like. So if things don't exactly match the way they might have been in the TV show, well, I've got a whole list of excuses for that. But what it comes down to is I just decided to make it the way I wanted it. So we have the control panel, what I use to control the model. There's the enclosure, which I really wanted to make accessible for future repairs or additions. We have the power system, how we distributed and brought in power to the whole model. We have the view screen system, the small Moiré scanner, the LED chaser, the blinking panel LEDs, the lighting that stays on all the time, the constant lighting. There's the sound system. There's the red alert system, which of course uses sound. And I will discuss each of these in detail in its own chapter. Starting with my control panel, I had custom labels printed, and I wanted to kind of imitate the style of the original series. We have a main power switch, a view screen cycler that changes the images on the view screen, and of course the red alert button. And each of these has its own indicator LED. I sketched this out several times to try to find the design that I really wanted. And I had to struggle a bit to source the buttons and the rocker switch, but I did find ones that I thought were pretty good matches for what I was hoping to do. One of the issues I had was that these buttons were supposed to, in my original plan, light up themselves. The body of the button should have lit up when pushing it, but no matter how I struggled with that, I couldn't make it work the way I wanted to, so I decided to use indicator lights instead. And I did have these real cute metal enclosures for each LED. So I'm happy to have those, and I think it came out to be a pretty good-looking control panel. I built the enclosure out of sheet styrene. I first thought I was going to have all of the electronics hidden under the model, but finally I realized I was going to have an outside perimeter enclosure anyway, so I decided not to have a compartment underneath the model, but instead to just use a solid piece of insulation foam, which is really easy to cut and work with. It's very lightweight and rigid as the base. Then all around the outside, I've got all of the wires and the fiber optics and the microprocessors and the power distribution, and everything had to be hidden and concealed. But I wanted to be able to get in there in case I needed to for future repairs or additions. So my original plan was to have both the walls and the lid of the enclosure removable, held on only by magnets. It became too much of a problem, so I just made the tops removable, and they are held on pretty nicely with magnets. I covered the seams with a little bit of trim, just to make things look nice, and I put the speaker right on the front so that we could have good sound coming out. For speaker cloth, I used a piece of an old bag that some kind of clothing came in, and I just cut out a little square of that, and it looks kind of futuristic and nice, especially with the trim around the outside. Working on the enclosure, I was really aided by having these magnetic right angle clamps that I got on Etsy. They're extremely high quality and work really well to hold things level and straight and true while you're waiting for glue to set up. So I really recommend those. The other thing about the enclosure was the problem of blocking light leaks. But I used a combination of paint, epoxy putty, and this really great light blocking tape to take care of that. I really struggled with power. In my original plan, this was going to be a battery-operated model so that it could work anywhere that I happened to carry it. But the demands of all of the systems involved, the amperage, the current required was really high, as it turned out. So I finally settled on just having it powered by a AC power adapter. I used a 10 amp 5 volt power supply, and that made it so that I didn't have to really be so strict about my power consumption and worrying about charging the battery and having a charging port. The power leads in through a nice cord clamp into the enclosure, and then I use these great power distribution bars, actually just one for the main power, but it provided a strong resistance-free connection for all of my various subsystems. The power distribution bar basically provides the rails with a positive and negative rail available for each system. So I used a higher gauge wire to run from there to the various subsystems with kind of a trunk and branch setup. So we've got large, thick power supply coming in and then dividing up into smaller, more easily usable wires for the smaller subsystems. The panels to the right and left, or port and starboard of the view screen, were the first attempt I made at using fiber optics to make these colored blinky lights. I really wanted different lights to have different colors, which would be tough to do if I just had LEDs shining through the holes in the panels. So I had to put a fiber optic through each tiny little hole. My effort with these panels was successful in terms of getting it to shine through and getting the LEDs attached. But I did have some early failures with trying to glue the fiber optics in place. Putting them through, first I tried just pushing them through a tiny bit and putting a dab of glue on there. That was a disaster. Sometimes I used a huge amount of glue on the backside, and that made everything very brittle, so some things just snapped off. What I finally hit on was pushing all the way through, gluing them in place mostly from the back with cyano acrylate glue, super glue, crazy glue, very thin, and then painting, then trimming off the ends of the fiber optics to make them almost flush with the surface of the panel. That worked pretty well, I feel, and I really enjoy having each little light be its own separate entity so that I could control colors more. I really, really wanted a working view screen on this model. I wanted it to show animated GIFs as well as some still images, and I wanted it to change those images based on input from the control panel, based on that little button, the view screen button, so that we could cycle through a whole range of different images. There are 29 of them at this point. I wanted to have the images, the animations stored on an SD card and have the system read them from the SD card, but still cycle through based on a button press. That way I could have almost unlimited space to have as many animations as I wanted. Well, I couldn't make that work. I struggled with that for over a week, trying to get that to work from reading from the SD card. I will say here, ChatGPT steered me wrong over and over again, circling back to the same attempts that had not worked before. It just became too frustrating, and so I just used the built-in memory of the ESP32. That gave me enough for 29 different images and animations. And I think if I can't be satisfied with 29, then I can't be satisfied with anything. I really wanted to make a variety of different images that might appear on the view screen. I really do like this view screen. It is kind of a highlight for me of the interactivity of the project. This Moiré scanner really should be above Spock's station if it were going to be screen accurate. And I would have done that, except I didn't think of doing the Moiré scanner with a real video screen until much later, after I had already built the science substation. So I put it in a different place, but I'm really happy with the way it came out. It's a monochrome screen, and just with a little animated GIF looping there. It's a one ESP32 dedicated completely to that, and that's all it does is when it's on, it loops that GIF. Real simple code, but it adds a little more motion and animation to the model as a whole. The LED chaser under the main view screen took me way longer than I would have expected to make it work. It felt really important to me to have this look right to my imagination. It was difficult because there's 15 LEDs in my vision of this chaser, and I had to drill the little holes into the plastic of the kit, mount tiny little LEDs for each hole, make the code so that the chaser would operate exactly how I envisioned it, with each successive light coming on while the previous light stayed on, and then starting the chase over again. There's just not that many pins available on a ESP32. So I first tried with shift registers that would allow me to use just a couple of pins to power all 15 lights, and I got it working. But the EM interference from the view screen data caused everything to get completely screwed up. So I shielded those wires with some tin foil. That kind of worked. And then somehow I fried one of the shift registers after I had soldered everything up. So that whole plan had to be scrapped. And I just used one dedicated ESP32 with each pin driving its own LED. And I used a separate power distribution bar to handle all the resistors so that each LED has its own 220 ohm resistor. I feel like it was an early success that fed my future progress on the project. I wanted my bridge to have lots and lots of different colored blinky lights. It's maybe even more than the TV version has. I wanted them to blink somewhat randomly with different colors at different times. And I wanted an assortment of different colors on each panel, on each bridge substation. So I worked to get the fiber optic technique perfected, or close to perfected. Once I finally got that, it was just a matter of spending a lot of time putting those little fiber optics through the little holes, gluing them from the back, then going and bundling them all together so that there would be 3 different colors at each substation, attaching those bundles to its own LED. For this, I used shrink tubing, which worked great, often with a little bit of glue dropped inside of it just to keep things nice and sturdy and attached. Then I primed, then I sealed, then I painted, and then and only then did I trim off all of the ends of the fiber optics to allow the little lights to be almost flush with the surface of the panel. The coding here was really easier than I thought it was going to be. It's a simple sketch that lights 2 colors at any one time. ChatGPT wrote that sketch for me in 2 seconds, and it worked right away from the start. In addition to the blinking lights, I also had the transparencies on the upper and lower screens on the bridge stations that I wanted to be constantly lit. For those, I found these flexible LED filaments, they call them nudes on Adafruit, to be really useful. I tried several different methods, and some of the earlier stations have some different approaches, but The nudes are able to kind of wrap around the outside of the opening and light from the sides, so pretty much eliminating hot spots from the light behind the transparencies. The nudes attach really well to the outside of the model panels using hot glue, so it held them in place pretty well. It took a lot of them, but I got a nice, bright, even light for those permanently on, those constant LEDs. A couple other constant LEDs are in the chair, the command chair, and the navigation and helm station. I had some light leak problems there, so my red alert indicator does glow green when it's not red. That's a mistake, and it is what it is. I really debated about sound for this project. My original plan was not to have any sounds, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt that it really added something. So I tried it, and I gotta say, I think it makes a big difference. I was able to get the ambient bridge sounds and the intro when the power goes on, and that all worked well. And then also, of course, the red alert sound. So all of those sounds had to be passed through an amplifier and then out through a speaker attached to the enclosure. That was really not too difficult to do, although getting everything straight between the ESP32, which was small and had limited numbers of pins, but it all came out to really be pretty good. I knew I was going to want to have a red alert as a function because, what's the bridge without a red alert? Sometimes there's trouble. You need to have a red alert system. And I wanted that to be triggered by the button on the control panel. And I wanted the lights to flash both on either side of the bridge on those panels and by the turbo lift doors. And, of course, on the helm navigation system. The kit didn't come with a clear plastic piece for that, I guess you call it a pyramid or a trapezoid, but I really wanted that. So I made that out of some spare clear plastic I had and put some light diffusing matte clear coat on it. And so it's a little bigger than the scale really should be, but I've got a real nice red alert that's alerting. It makes you feel alert. And we've got the flashing happening. If you're interested in knowing more about this project or you have questions or comments, please leave them on this video. And I wanted to put this out there to help those who might want to try this themselves.